Folks, if I could have your attention, I'd like to call the Planning Commission meeting for May 23rd together here this morning. I'm Kevin Jeffries, Chairman. Before we get started, I would like to ask if you have a cell phone with you to please turn it off or turn it on vibrate so it doesn't interfere with the cameras here in the courtroom. Before we get started, let's, if you can, join me for a Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioners, just I think everyone knows, but just wanted to make you aware, if you would, to keep Miss Joyce Albertson in your thoughts and prayers. She's having a little medical issue, nothing serious, but just need to keep her in thoughts and prayers if you can, or if you will. So she will not be with us today for our hearings. Before we get started, let's go ahead and get staff sworn in. Ms. Fox?
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, and the next item on our agenda is the approval of our April 25th meeting minutes, which were mailed out or provided to you in our packet. So if you would, go take a look at those. And is there any additions or corrections we need to make? Mr. Finney? Your mic on?
Nope, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
On page 6,
Okay.
6, where it says the vote was as follows, unfortunately, they left my name out.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I was heartbroken.
Okay, all right. We will correct that.
And then on page 10,
And let me just make sure, you voted in favor, correct?
as I recall, yes.
Yeah.
I don't think there was any.
I don't
yeah.
think there was anybody
Right.
against, right?
On page 10, I just had I don't know if it's language or just an interpretation or question. It'll be the 6th bullet point down from the top. Will trash cans and barrels towards the exit? Will be, but there's not a significant design. I just, it didn't make any sense, and I'm not sure what you need a design for trash barrels.
Well, let's just take out and put a period after exit. How's that?
Okay. I'll just question, I didn't know
Yeah.
what,
Right. Okay. Anything else, Mr. Finney?
that's all, thank you.
Okay, any other additions or corrections? Yes, ma'am, Ms. Crosby?
And you all probably don't know, you got me present, then you have me absent. I really was absent, so
Okay.
if you'll see at the top, you got me present.
Okay.
Then you have me absent.
We will correct that. Anything else? Any other additions or corrections? Not, could we have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
Mr. Chairman, move to approve the minutes as corrected.
Okay, have a motion to approve. Do we have a second? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes as corrected from April 25th signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Okay, the minutes have been approved. All right. Ms. Alvey, is the applicant here?
Well, the first item on your agenda is the application that was originally docketed at the beginning of 2017 by the City of LaGrange for the approval of zoning map amendment on 19 acres. That is somewhat related to your docket 17 and 18 today. But that is where the city was applying for the full 3 parcels, and then they had sent me an email. The Planning Commission had tabled that docket, and so now the city is asking that they are withdrawing the application, so I think the Planning Commission needs to remove it from the table to officially have it withdrawn.
Okay. All right, Commissioners, the chair would entertain a motion to replace a docket, I'm sorry.
Withdraw.
Withdraw, okay, to withdraw the docket
001.
001,
It
okay.
needs to be removed from the table first.
Yeah, we need to
Yeah.
put it back on the table.
Yes.
And so we need a motion to put it back on the table. If I could. Okay, do we have a second? Second. Okay, that's non-debatable, non-amendable, comes to immediate vote. All those in favor of placing docket 001 back on the table signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Okay, and now we need to,
I guess we'll just make, note in the minutes that the application was withdrawn by the applicant, which was the city of LaGrange.
Okay, do we
So-
need that in a motion?
I don't think it needs to be a motion. I just think it's to be part of the record that application has been withdrawn by the city of LaGrange.
Okay, so that would be in the minutes then?
Yes,
that,
sir.
Okay, so no action of the commission other than just putting it back on the table?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
all right. And with that, is the applicant here yet? Okay, they're not here. All right. Let's move down to other business. And I had on here just an update on House Bill 72. That was just passed in our last legislative session in Frankfurt, and it affects appeals on, or it can affect some appeals through the planning process. So I asked John, our county attorney, if he would just kind of give us a quick kind of overview. I know there's going to be a few of us that are going tomorrow down to a training that David Pike is going to put on for House Bill 55, which I think there'll be a more in-depth discussion about House Bill 72, but I kind of wanted to give everybody just a broad overview of what that is, what it means. Oh, John?
Yeah, well, basically, as I read the bill, it requires any appeal to an appellate court, which would be the circuit court, basically, from either the planning commission or any of the other entities, to post a bond. The court has to require a bond, and also has to hold a hearing before the appeal can proceed as to the veracity of the appeal. So basically, there's two things has to happen before the appeal can go forward. I think this grows out of, there was a Supreme Court opinion. What used to happen is there used to be people that lost at the Planning Commission, and then they were appealed. They would file a slap suit against the people that were appealing. But there was a Supreme Court opinion that came out about somewhere between 10 to 15 years ago, which sort of nullified those slap suits, saying the person had a right to appeal that kind of decision without the possibility of being sued for it. So I think this is meant to correct that, to allow those kinds of some kind of precondition to appealing to the court system from a decision by the Planning Commission on any of these cases. It applies to both the applicant and those opposing it if they appeal. So we don't have any right now.
Right, we don't have any, but we've had cases that this would have, if this had been in effect at that time when those cases came
Right.
forward, it could have had an effect.
And there's going to be, I would suspect, some constitutional issues raised about that, because it possibly violates the separation of powers clause in the Kentucky Constitution, because courts generally decide what kind of bonds are required in a lawsuit, and they also usually are the ones that determine, well, there's always a determination of whether or not a suit is frivolous. And so the legislature is sort of venturing into the purview of the court system, and the question is whether the court system is going to give comity to the statute, or decide they're going to apply their right under the Constitution not to be infringed upon by the legislature.
All right,
Mr.
any
Chairman,
questions? Yes, Mr.
Question
Williams.
for Mr. Carter.
Is your mic on, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
What is a slap suit?
Well, what used to happen is when opponents to a planning decision would appeal it, the developer would sue them for whatever damages they might have gotten if they won on the appeal, for the damages between the time that they were required not to proceed with their development and the time that they were allowed to proceed with it.
Interesting.
A slap suit that's not the legal term. That's just what everybody called it.
Okay. Well, I'd not heard it.
Okay. Any other questions for our council? Just thought it would be because it could, have an effect on some of our cases going down the road, some of the more controversial ones, things like that. And we'll hear more details about it as we move forward or whatever, as it gets challenged probably, and as Mr. Carter pointed out, it will probably be challenged, so we'll try to keep an eye on it as to how that will affect the rulings of some of our cases down the road, so. Jim?
I just want to clarify one thing, John, that if they appeal a decision of the Planning Commission or Board of Adjustments to Circuit Court, they don't have to post the bond. It's if they go to the Court of Appeals. Did I read that correctly?
I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but the way I read it, it was, let me see.
I think it is, that, you can appeal, if you feel aggrieved by a decision here, you can appeal to a Circuit Court. It's if you take it further after a Circuit Court decision.
Okay.
Seemed to me somewhere in there, that's what it said.
Well, the posting of the appeal bond is in circuit court.
Oh, it is.
Yes.
Okay.
Really?
All right, well, that's, and like I say, we'll kind of see how this works out as we move forward or whatever, but I just wanted to bring everybody kind of up to date on what, what the change, because from what I'm hearing, they could, have quite a bit of effect on folks' ability to, or to take a decision that we would make to the circuit court or, all the way through the Court of Appeals and up ultimately to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and it also applies to the, one subsection is if the circuit court determines that an appeal is presumptively frivolous, the circuit court shall consider all cost, economic loss, and damages that the appellee may suffer or incur during the pendency of or that will be caused by the appeal, including attorney fees, court costs, up to a maximum amount of $250,000. But like I say, there's a Supreme Court opinion out there that says that's can't do that.
Right, okay. All
Some
righty.
more.
Any other questions on this before we move forward? Okay, John. Mr. Carter, thank you, sir, for providing that information. And like I say, we'll probably hear more about it tomorrow at our training. Okay, we'll do, okay, they're here. All right. We'll go ahead and I'll ask Ms. Fox if she will read our next, the two docketed items here, 17 and 18. Ms. Fox, if you would.
Docket PZ 17-017, application has been filed by J.W. Hall III for the approval of a zoning map amendment on approximately 5 acres. The property is located at 1824 Pine Ridge Road, LaGrange. The change is from R2 residential to C3 commercial general business district. Docket PZ 17-018, application has been filed by J.W. Hall for approval of a development plan on approximately 5 acres. The property is located at 1824 Pine Ridge Road, LaGrange. The proposed zoning is C3 Commercial General Business District.
All right, and before we get started on that, I've had a couple of questions from commissioners about potential conflict of interest or whatever. Several folks, I've had 2 or 3 that's asked me that they have insurance with J.W. Hall. And Mr. Carter, you informed me that would not be considered a conflict as far as, hearing this case?
That's correct.
Okay, so we're good on that. So, Ms. Alvey, if you would introduce the docket to the commission, please.
Absolutely. Good morning, Amy Alvey, Senior Planner with Oldham County Planning Development Services. As Ms. Fox stated, this is an application for a zoning map amendment and development plan at 1824 Pine Ridge Road. The property is approximately 5 acres. It is currently zoned R2 residential, and the proposed zoning is 3C Commercial Business District. There have been no previous actions before the Planning Commission regarding this property. This is the aerial view of the property, outlined there in red. You can see it is directly located behind the Cub Bank and runs parallel with Kroger property and Richwood, which I'm not sure it's actually called Richwood anymore, but the nursing home facility that is located there in LaGrange. This is the area view. You'll show the hashed areas there is the existing driveway, and the gray areas are the existing structures. This is the existing house with a little garage, and then this is a shed here to the side. This shows the current adjoining zoning. You can see over here there's the Kroger, the Cub Bank. Kroger is zone C3, Cub Bank is zone C1. The property that is to the southeast, which is known as the Priest property, that's where Tractor Supply is located. It is zone C3, and then to the south, into the, we'll say, northeast, or I'm sorry, northwest is R4 and R2, which is the Cherrywood development, and then this is the nursing home and assisted living center. This is looking into the property from right past Cub Bank into the Perkinson property at Pine Ridge Road. You can see that the curb and the pavement ends there, and then it's an existing gravel drive that traverses back to the home. This is the north view looking back from the gravel drive back to Highway 53. There is a cross entrance there for Kroger and Cub Bank. This is the north view. This is the view of Cub Bank from the property. This is the west view, which adjoins Kroger. It's very heavily treed along the existing gravel driveway. This is the rear yard that abuts Tractor Supply. Again, it's all heavily treed in between the applicant's property and the priest property. This is the actual home, residential home that is located on the property. This is a southern view that looks out on into, there are approximately 10 acres to the south of this that is owned by the Westbrooks. So this is looking into the Westbrook property. And again, this is just the north view at the terminus of Pine Ridge Road, back towards 53. This is the site plan that outlines the property outlined there in red. There at Pine Ridge Road is a 60-foot right-of-way that goes from Highway 53 back into the Westbrook property. The applicant is proposing to renovate an existing 2,169 square foot residence into commercial space, and currently showing the proposed use to be a printing and lithograph shop. So this is just a zoomed in version of the site plan outlined in blue there. That is the existing house that makes up the square footage, and then this is just an attached two-car garage there. Pavement along Pine Ridge Road will be extended from the adjoining bank property to just south of the parking area on the applicant's property at a width of 20 feet and will be constructed to county standards. The plan outlines 11 parking spaces for the proposed use, which meets current parking regulations. So again, the area highlighted in green, that is the 60-foot right-of-way. It's measured on the site plan to be about 59 feet in actual. And there is 20 feet of pavement that will have curb and gutter along it as well. And then you'll see highlighted here in gray the proposed parking spaces, as well as the sidewalk into the front of the building and a sidewalk to Pine Ridge Road. The future land use map identifies the property as attached multifamily, which allows for office, neighborhood commercial, local business, and community business. This is the future land use map, and originally our GIS had the nursing home property owning all the way through, which we have not updated that yet, but this area that is highlighted in tan, that should actually be the same as the purple there. Our GIS manager will update that for us, but the future land use map, again, does show that the, sorry. Apologies. I'm not touching anything, and it's going through everything. But the future land use map identifies the property as attached multifamily, which allows for office, neighborhood commercial, local business, and community business. At any time, the use of the property changes or is expanded, which causes an increase in the required parking or increase in trip generation, the applicant will be required to submit a revised development plan to be reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission. So if the property is going to be repurposed into anything that increases a demand on parking or the trip generation, which would cause traffic counts and stuff to change, they would be required to come back to the Planning Commission for a revised development plan. And the plan meets all other zoning regulations at this time. So in summary, the applicant is requesting approval of a zoning map amendment and development plan on approximately 5 acres for property located at 1824 Pine Ridge Road, LaGrange, from from R2 to C3 commercial. And this would be a recommendation to Oldham County Fiscal Court. This property will not be annexed into the city of LaGrange at this time. So it will go to fiscal court for final approval or denial of the zoning request change. Be happy to answer any questions.
All right, commissioners, any questions for staff? Yes, sir. Mr.
You said will not be,
Will not be annexed into the city, no, sir.
is Pine Ridge County Road?
Yes.
Okay. And the utility, I'm getting a disagreement with you from the city.
Well, the city can come and speak if they want, if you have questions for them
Okay.
on that, but yeah.
Let me ask, Mr. Chisholm and Mr. Rusnick are both here. Do you all have anything you want to add to this as far as the discussion as far as staff's concerned? Or the city of LaGrange? Mr. Rusnick, we'll get you sworn in and then get your name and address for the record if we could. Ms. Fox?
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Duke.
Okay.
Fort Rusnack, I'm with the City of LaGrange, Public Works. As far as I know, the first half of Pine Ridge where the curb and gutter is probably, I have to get back to here. Where is it? Yes. This first half of Pine Ridge Road is in the City of LaGrange. From what I remember, it was brought under Cub Bank. So I don't know what the plan would be for the back half. If this is going to be county, let me get this off here.
Okay.
The applicant has
Or-
stated that they will construct it to county standards. Whether it will be a county road or a city road, I don't know how it would be a city road if it's not on city, it's not annexed into, the property's not annexed into the city. But we have documentation that fiscal court accepted the portion from 53 to the, right at the Cub Bank property into the county road system.
The only reason why I thought of that, because I knew the city scraped that road up to cold
Yeah.
in the wintertime. And I just didn't know how that's going to work when they just pile the snow wherever they're going to pile it at. Then the county comes in and does the rest down through there? Or?
Yeah,
So
I
you're
think
saying it is a county road?
we have documentation in our files that the county accepted into the county road network system
Really?
and released the bond.
I'll have to do a little research,
yeah,
because I'm not
I
sure.
can
I was
get-
always assumed it was the cities, so.
Yeah. I'm not sure, but we can
Either
work
way,
that out.
that
That's,
needs to be sorted out.
yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I don't think it would-
Suspect they
The
would
two
be.
road departments.
It'd be a pretty big conflict, in my opinion, because we have several roads like that that have been issued in the past.
It would be much easier if they just
One or
annexed
the
this
other.
property into the city.
Right.
Mr. Douglas, any
I
other
don't care either
questions?
way.
Not
I don't have
at this time,
Right.
for staff.
Thank you, Mr. Rusnick. All right, any additional questions for staff at this point? Any additional questions? All right, seeing none, we'll now move into the presentation by the applicant or representatives and others in support of the application. Mr. Williamson, I would assume that would be you. Okay,
You want to swear Mr.
Yes.
Hall
please. Ms. Fox, Ms.
and Mr. Melbourne in?
Okay, Ms. Fox, I'm sorry.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Okay. Yes, sir.
Okay, good morning. I'm Jim Williamson. I'm the attorney representing Mr. Hall and Mr. Perkison. Mr. Perkison owns the property, Gary Perkison. And I've been involved with this property just about as long as I've been practicing law. 1824 Pine Ridge Road, Norma Perkison, 1976. I closed it. She moved into the house and lived there until her death in 2009. Then Gary inherited the property. Property is, as has been stated, is zoned R2, and it's been zoned R2 since the early 70s. I believe the subdivision was developed in probably 70, 71. I even did the restrictions. For what it's worth, the restrictions have been revoked by the property owners. So there's no, it's not restricted between the property owners. So I've been involved in this property a long, long time myself. And I've been around. I've seen the changes in the neighborhood, Tractor Supply, Kroger, just Cub Bank, commercial development all around. The nursing home is not commercial, but it's, I believe, R4. So there's development all around the property other than, in a commercial way, other than the property that Mr. Westbrook owns, which is lots 2 and 3 of Shannon Acres, which is zoned R2. My opinion, for what it's worth, is that the present zoning R2 is just inappropriate. There's been too many changes in the community. Just in the basic area we're talking about, social, economic, structural. So, as Amy stated, to the north of the property, zone C3 and C1, south C3, east C3, and to the west we have the nursing home and Mr. Westbrook's property, which is zoned R4 and R2. The staff report reports that all of the requirements of the zoning ordinance have been met by the plan as presented today. We're asking for a change of zoning from R2 to C3. Also asking for the approval of a development plan for the property. The present plan for the property is to put a print shop and a lithograph shop in the present residence, which is about 2,100 square feet, and to add 11 parking spaces and to pave the road when the parking lot is put in. The staff informed me that it would be a good idea to ask a planning commission for a residential use waiver so the property can continue to be rented as a residential structure until the commercial user of the property moves into the property. Because if the zoning's changed to C3, as I understand the regulations, it can't be used as a residential structure in the future without the residential use waiver. So, Mr. Hall has gotten a letter of intent from a party to put his print shop and lithograph shop into the house. All goes well, then the lease will be signed. The property inside will be renovated to a certain extent to make way for the print shop and lithograph shop. If all goes well, but if things don't go quite so well, then it may continue to be rented for some time until, an appropriate tenant is found for the property. I think that's what's going to happen, but we would like to ask for the residential use waiver just in case. This is another, for what it's worth. I've been involved with Pine Ridge Road for over 40 years myself. My understanding was when Cub Bank was constructed, and I was involved in this, it was the roadway from 53 to the back of Cub Bank's property line was constructed to county standards, and it was my understanding the county maintained the road. Now, the city and the county may have worked something out in the interim, and Mr. Hall's plan is he wants to construct a road to county standards, to planning and zoning standards, and he would hope that when that's done, and the first part of it's been taken in, I would think that the rest of it back to his property line would be taken in if it's, constructed in accordance with the applicable standards as approved by your planning and zoning authorities. Whether it's a city or the county maintaining the road makes no difference. as long as it's a governmental agency. But what I'm saying is we're going to construct that road in accordance with your all standards. Mr. Melbourne has done the engineering, other work for Mr. Hall, and he'll be up here in a minute, and he'll testify and show you all some additional plats. Your staff does such a good job of showing everything to you. It makes it pretty easy for us, because it's really been explained, and that's about it. The one thing I want to say, though, is that if there's nothing else that we can come up with today, the present zoning is inappropriate. And we're asking that it be rezoned to C3 in order that Mr. Hall can put a print shop and a lithograph shop in the residence on the property. Ms. Alvey explained to you that if there's any changes in the plan for the property's use, if the traffic increases or if there's more parking needed, then Mr. Hall is going to have to come back before the Planning and Zoning Commission with a revised development plan. So whatever you all approve today would be the development plan that's been presented, and anything that would have an impact on, if the traffic increases substantially because he has another use for the property other than a print shop and a lithograph shop, then coming back to see you with a revised development plan. I'll let Mr. Melbourne take over from here. I
Reeves,
appreciate it.
let me ask you just
Yes.
real quick before you step
Sure.
down. On the, just so everybody, the commission here's what we're talking about here, that any other use other than a print shop or a lithograph shop, you all would come back to the commission for, I mean, I heard you say, increase in traffic and things like that, but if the use actually changed or the business type changed, you would still come back to the commission.
Let me answer that
Okay.
for you, because we have proposed binding elements that we'll get to, but we're considering not whether it's a print or lithograph shop, it's whether it increases either parking or trip generation.
Okay.
So any other use that doesn't add parking spaces or traffic counts would be allowed.
Okay.
In that binding element.
Just want to make sure we had
I
that clear.
agree with that. That's correct.
All right.
Or an expansion of the property in any way
Yeah.
would come back.
Okay. All right, Mr. Miller, good. We'll get your name and address for the record also, please.
Good morning. My name is Mel Milburn. I live at 3907 Clark Point Court in Crestwood.
Sir?
Amy has done such a really good job for this. As I was looking at what she had prepared for you, I thought, okay, she somehow got into my computer, because my presentation you've already seen. But so I'll go through it quickly, just for your benefit. These pictures, actually, some of the pictures that are shown here actually look like the exact same pictures that she took. So it must have been very convenient to where we were taking the photos at. Just for a general location for anyone who might not understand exactly where it is, I wanted to put this overall plan up so we can look at the general area. I-71 to the north, 53 to the northeast, and Zalesmith to the east. The property located just northwest of Zalesmith Road on Highway 53.
Trevor, can you just draw that on the screen there? And it'll.
Yes, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry. Here? Good.
Okay.
Again, the slide showing the current adjoining property uses, Kroger to the northwest, the Richwood Nursing Facility to the west or southwest, the Tractor Supply and the Priest property, all commercial zone to the south and southeast, and Cub Bank to the northeast. This is the development plan as it stands. The acre is sorry, the lot is approximately 5 acres, a little over 5 acres. The current residence is just to the east of the property right there, and that's the only portion that's going to be any changes made to with this development. This is a blow-up of the particular site. It shows that the plan is to extend the Pine Ridge Road down to an area just beyond the entrance to the proposed parking lot, for the building right here. No other development at this time. The actual change to the site is insignificant as far as the imperviousness of the site. I believe that the total area covered by structures is 1.2%, and the actual total impervious area on the site is only up to 3.35% with this development. This again shows the site with the current zoning: C3 to the northwest, C3 to the southeast, C1 to the northeast and across the road, R4 at Richwood to the southwest, and then it is bounded by R2 property on the southwest. It should be noted, though, that nowhere does this property touch any property that has an existing single-family residence. Even though Mr. Westbrook's property is zoned R2, it is vacant as of this time. And this shows the current request for the area to be zoned C3. I really have nothing else at this point.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Williamson, is there anything else that you all would like to present? Okay, probably need to get that on the record if you could, sir. You need to get you back on the record where we can hear it. Sorry.
Back on the record. No, we don't have anything further at this time. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So that completes your application at this point? All right. Application is considered completed. Now, I'd like to ask, is there anyone here that would like to speak in support of this application? Support. Uh-huh. You'll have an opportunity to, if you have questions or testimony opposed to here in just a moment. But is there anyone here that would like to speak in support of? All right. We'll now move into the testimony and questions by those opposing the application. So if you're here and would like to testify or have questions, can we get everyone that would like to do that? Let's get everybody stood up one time, and I'll get them sworn in, and then we'll do your name and address when you come forward. Ms. Fox?
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Okay. And whoever would like to come first, be fine. All right.
My name is Adam Baer.
Adam Baer?
Adam Baer, like the aspirin.
Okay.
1100 Cherrywood Court. This is a subdivision that's behind this area. I do have a question. I don't know if I'm allowed to do this. There was quite a few people that weren't aware of this. They couldn't make it. I have a letter from the Homeowners Association president of Cherrywood Association. He asked me if I could read at this meeting, and I was wondering if I could read that letter now.
Carter?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Let me find it here. Oldham County Planning Commission. As a longtime resident of Oldham County, I am deeply concerned about the proposed commercial development next to Kroger. When we moved here 15 years ago, the creek behind our house was about 2 foot deep. After all the development that has occurred since, the erosion from the water runoff has gouged out places 8 foot deep, and in places 12 to 15 foot wide. The tremendous rainstorm we had 3 weekends ago washed out a raised garden that it has never reached before. It also washed out a bridge, and the water volume became so high the 6 foot in diameter culvert around Cherrywood was covered. That is actually a road that you use to enter Cherrywood subdivision. Any further development will surely make this event become much worse. I am all for development when the effects of that development are addressed. Please consider the water drainage and the damage it will do when you make your decision. The county engineers told me when the retention basin behind my house was made, it would not work properly. He was correct. The water from the runoff does not go into the basin the way it was designed. the water would have to make an angle into the basin. Sincerely, Lee Kaiser, Cherrywood HOA President. He wasn't able to make this meeting. They actually, had other plans. They did not find out about this meeting until, I believe, Saturday. And I happened to go up and tell him about it. He knew nothing of this. This does affect him. He didn't receive a letter or anything. So that's why he wasn't able to make it today. As far as I go, I do have several questions and other things. I know when they came up and spoke, they talked about where this was located, that it's, how the land has changed, that there's, since it was zoned R2 in the past, now you've got Kroger, which is commercial, you have the nursing home. He forgot to mention, there's a subdivision behind this with 300 middle-class residents. They didn't mention that. That is also a newer development, been there about 15 years. This would affect every resident of that subdivision. Many of them, even though this doesn't back up straight to some people's houses, a lot of them, which I don't have the exact map, I've got one. It doesn't really show, depending on which map you look at, exactly where the property ends. That is a question I have. We have been told 5 acres, approximately 5 acres. I have an application where he applied. It says it's actually 6.2372 acres. I do have that question if anybody can answer it. What is the exact size of the land? Nobody seems to really know. If I look at one, it says 5, one says 5.02. This one says 6.2372. And the other one that I look at says 6.8 something. Before we decide to vote on what is going to be turned commercial, we as residents would like to know, how much land is it? If it's 6.8, it's not approximately 5. If I told someone I'm approximately 5 foot tall, it would be a flat out lie. I'm 6'1". So it's not even close. Can anybody answer how much land it really is? We'd like to know.
Let me ask the applicant if he would,
Okay.
if they would come back up.
And before I forget, that we need a copy of that letter for the,
Record.
that you read for the record.
Which one?
The
Oh.
one you read.
Homeowners Association.
Okay, if
president.
somebody can make a copy of it, it's the only one I've got.
Well, we'll put it in the record and you can come get a copy later. Yeah, but we just need for the,
Mr. Williamson, can
You
you?
would answer the
Yes,
question.
absolutely.
The application, the property in question is 5.02 acres. It comprises what is shown on a record plat as lot number 1, Shannon Acres. I believe that the application, when it was originally filed, included the roadway. The roadway was taken out. Am I correct with that, Ms. Alvey?
Correct. The original plan included the 60-foot right-of-way for Pine Ridge Road, which is not owned by the applicant. So the applicant requests that that part of the land to be rezoned. So the only thing that's being rezoned today is the applicant's property, which is the 5.02 acres. Again, they had originally included the area of the road right-of-way for Pine Ridge Road as part of the total site size, which it is not. It is only the 5.02 acres owned by Ms. Perkinson.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Beard? All right.
I appreciate them, clarifying that, because that confused a lot of people. A lot of people did not believe that I had spoke to in the subdivision that this came back as far as it actually does. They didn't think it would reach near our subdivision. And if you look at a few of the maps that I do have, you can obviously tell that some of the homeowners, when they look out their back corner, they will see where the
If
commercial
you would put
is.
that on the
Okay.
overhead, and that way we can display it.
If you look at this back corner right here, this is a residential house right here. He would easily be able to look out and see commercial units there when this all becomes C3. That was my first question. So a lot of people didn't know how far back this land really goes. Because I have different maps, and it depends on which one you look at, where it actually goes to. I also have this one that some people have seen, which shows the commercial land coming all the way up here to the corner, which wouldn't affect anybody in the subdivision. They wouldn't be able to look back. They would still see residential area. They wouldn't see the commercial towards the front. And then I have other ones that, again, show different spots. Every one that I have shows a different spot of exactly where the land goes to. I think a lot of the residents would really like to know exactly where the commercial land would end. Would it be would they be able to walk out their back corner and see commercial development or not?
Now we can bring up the,
And this needs to be applicant making, telling us where it is, not
okay.
Is this, the applicant made the,
I want, Amy will bring this back up, and then
Okay.
I'll call Mr. Williamson back up, if you would, or Mr. Melbourne, one, to point out exactly where the outline of the property is that is in question.
Okay.
It's being
If-
applied for today. Mr. Melbourne?
I think this is a pretty good representative of it. It starts right there at the corner of Cub Bank, and it ends right here at the beginning of the Westbrook property.
and if you can see that, if you're this homeowner, you could easily look out your back corner and see if that goes if that is commercial and is developed, you would be able to see that. It would no longer be residential looking into residential. It would be residential looking straight into commercial, which would definitely hurt his property value, which in turn hurts the whole subdivision. That was my one concern, exactly where the land is. My other question is on the developmental plan. Obviously, he's planning on developing just this area right here commercially. There is no need for all of this, which is now R2, to be commercial. If that's all he's developing at commercial, then that's all that, in my opinion, should be voted upon. You're still taking 3/4 of the land and turn it into commercial with no plan of development on that land. I understand he would have to come back to planning and zoning in order to put something in, but he's already got that approved that it's going to be commercial without a plan. It definitely should have a plan. We should know now, be able to have the opportunity to look at what that will look like in the future if he's going to turn that commercial now. As he said, I think he said something about he wants to keep this usage at R2 just in case the lithograph doesn't work out. In my opinion, that sounds like they plan on the lithograph, but they're really not sure what they want to do yet, that they may change their mind. And you all would be voting on this to turn it commercial with the idea that they may be changing their mind and putting something completely different in. I think that Jay Hall had a meeting and with the homeowners, there were very few people that showed up because not many of them knew about the meeting. We weren't informed. I live down a few houses from where this land will be changed, and I didn't, I live like maybe 10 houses down. I didn't know about the meeting on the 15th. I wasn't aware of any of this until just the other day. The two homeowners that did show up, they asked a few questions. I have spoke to them. They said that at the time they asked about the future of it, and that Jay Hall even mentioned eventually possibly a strip mall or something. If that is a possibility, it shouldn't be turned commercial with the possibility that down the line there may be a strip mall without us seeing that now. That's usually the way it goes. He would put the developmental plan in, from my understanding, that he's going to be putting a strip mall in and then to do commercial. Not make it all commercial and then later on put in a strip mall. We should be able to see that, in my opinion, for all residents. A strip mall, stripping that land would greatly affect everyone. Everyone would be able to see it. One of the other big questions, and the other people that are going to come up and talk to me, we have a few with pictures and everything, is the drainage that they set up. Can you pull that one up for me that shows the drainage? I think you had that.
It's not a drainage plan that they presented.
Well, it kind of showed the runoff when he put he had like a creek running from a water basin towards the creek that's there now, that right there. I believe that, I'm guessing this right here would be a creek, and this is a retention basin from my very little knowledge of what I'm looking at. Is that accurate?
No, you ask the applicant.
Mr. Melbourne, or would you like to come and address that?
Yeah, this area here is actually a retention basin for the Tractor Supply
Okay.
and the Pristine Point development. This, the area that's going across here is the current drainage pattern. We were just going to put an easement in there so that it would have to remain current drainage.
Okay. That was my question. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Go ahead. This creek continues forward, and it goes behind some houses. And actually, this is the creek that crosses, goes under Cherrywood Drive, the main entrance for over half the subdivision. I've been there 15 years. Twice, that creek has come over the road to where you couldn't cross it. And that's without, any development right there. That water has come over that road twice to where you couldn't cross. adding more commercial units in there and possibly, more concrete, and actually taking this retention basin and running it that way is just going to compound that problem. The people that live back there, like Mr. Kaiser said, how bad it has gotten over the time, it is just going to continue to get worse and worse and worse. And that is an issue that greatly needs to be addressed. I believe there needs to be quite a few, and I think you all call them amendments or restrictions on the land, if the commercial does go through. One would be that, first of all, I really believe we should have a true idea of what's going in there. I mean, to say it's going to be a lithograph and he's using 1/5 of the area, and you have 5 acres that he wants to turn commercial that's wooded with no plan on that 5 acres. That's unheard of in my opinion. We should definitely see a plan of what's going on. That is my main argument. Secondly, the drainage is a huge issue. If he gets commercial and he was to come through and strip that land, just say in 5 years, he comes back and says, look, we're going to clear that land, we're going to put a ditch in, it's commercial, we're going to pave it. Could you imagine the water that's going to come through there? The people that aren't going to be able to access Cherrywood because of that road. We believe he should have to not just make the ditch through this area, but if he's going to be adding all that extra water that runs continuously behind those houses and under that road, he should have to make that correct too, because he is going to compound that problem tremendously. It already floods people's yards. I think it, has gotten into a few buildings back in that area. Over the road, the retention basin can't handle the water that we have now since Tractor Supply was put in, since Kroger was put in. There's more commercial development going in that's not there yet. The land's already been changed commercially. The buildings aren't there, it's not paved, all that's going to go that way. When all this land over here that is currently commercial, when that's developed, that's already going to put more stress on that creek. Just adding this is a whole lot extra. You're adding way too much commercial area to an area that already has too much as it is. To say that the commercial area is needed, currently I don't believe it is. He has a lot, there are lots here that is for sale that's commercially that aren't developed. They've been sold for years. The land in front of Tractor Supply is commercial that hasn't been developed. It has been vacant for years. There's land beside the dollar store by Walmart that is for sale that's commercial that has been sitting vacant for years. There's no need for the extra commercial at this time. I'm asking for planning and zoning to not to recommend this currently, to give residents the opportunity that Mr. Hall or the owners to come back with a true developmental plan that shows exactly what it's going to look like in the future, not one that just says there might be a lithograph shop, we might rent it out residential, we're not sure what we're going to do yet, but we want it commercially just in case we want to do this. I don't know a lot about planning and zoning, but I didn't think that was the way it was supposed to go. I thought he was supposed to come in with a plan. This is what I'm going to do. This is why I'm going to do it. And that is it. Not, I might be doing this. I might rent it residential. I understand he's got a contract, a verbal agreement saying they're going to rent it. But like he said, they may just use it as residential. They may put a lithograph. It may not work out. They may go with something else. That's not a developmental plan. That is an ideal.
Okay. Mr. Beard, I know there's 3 other folks that want to testify.
understand.
Your time's going to be running down here shortly, so unless you have something new to add, I think the commission's heard.
That's fine. I will let them come up and talk. I appreciate your all's time. Again, I do hope you all, do not recommend this. It will affect 300 residents in Cherrywood subdivision. Thank you.
All right, who would like to go next? Just need your name and address for the record also.
Michelle Massey. I'm at 1004 Oakwood Court. And our property, we've been in our property for 14 years. It's directly behind the back of Richwood where the residential residents are. And it's directly along the creek that you've already heard a lot about. But we've lived there 14 years. The first 4 years we were there, I could put a giant garden in the back corner of my property, which did awesome. Now I can't do it anymore because the piece of that property stays wet through a good part of the spring for sure, way into the summer. And in addition to the drainage issue, We also have had to remove 10 giant emerald ash trees. The nursing home has had to remove a bunch, and it's on our property line as well. And so we've got that compounding the environmental issues that we've got a lot of emerald ash trees in the buffer with what we develop here and Cherrywood subdivision. So I think we need to look at professionally having someone come in, a civil engineer or someone, and really look at these environmental issues. That creek has eroded immensely, as you have already heard, but I'm watching it every day. It's significantly impacting our property value and potentially our foundations if we don't get something done. And you can tell each time we've developed something, it gets worse. And now with all the emerald ash trees out as well, it's a big deal. And so I think we need to professionally look at the drainage. I would also like to see a lot more on this plan about obviously what we're going to do, but also what is going to be the buffer between the development, the nursing home, the residential. In addition, I'm interested in looking at where the property lines actually are between Richwood and the development. So I know you have some information on that, but I'd like to look at that and see it, because we had some significant, when we were just trying to figure out whose property these emerald ash trees were on, we had to have a professional study done because the nursing home wasn't quite sure where those trees. So I really want to look at the property line. I want to be informed. Our neighborhood is not opposed at all to development and progress, but we do want a good plan. We do want the plan to be what it actually becomes, and we want it to contribute to our neighborhood. We have 300 families. We have a ton of children. We want them to be able to play out in the yards and, you know, have a great community. And so we're really interested in just knowing more. We have not received good communication at all. We didn't receive a notice about the meeting, or we definitely would have been there to get the information in advance. And so I'd just like to really take a look professionally at what we're going to do to the neighborhood environmentally and what we're going to put there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Greg Ward. I'm at 2203 Cherrywood Drive. I have a problem with water. I'm concerned about the plan that he has up there. I'm going to, I guess, lay this here. Is that all right? I don't know if it's the right way or not. Currently, the land that's under question is this 5 acres right here. He has his proposed drainage ditch going directly, I'm at lot 10 here in Cherrywood. And all of this up here is upper level, so everything flows downhill. What they don't really show is the rest of that 9 acres. It also goes this direction towards the subdivision, and then we'll come to the east to the west, or west to east, I should say, into that creek. So we have a lot of, so 4 or 5 times a year, this is my backyard from the creek overflowing. You can see the creek, and his proposed drainage is coming down through this right here. So this is what I deal with 4 or 5 times a year, along with the rest of the residents that they were just talking about. So my question, I guess, to the planning and zoning is to probably have them relook at all the water flow and not to, you know, just put this drainage, proposed drainage that he's got. He needs to move it because it's going to add all kinds of extra water in that area. And you need to look downstream and don't just push the problem from here to there to there. It needs to be handled accordingly.
Alrighty.
All right?
Yes, sir.
That's just my main concern, and I wish you guys would, like I said, take a serious look at the, what he's planning on doing and, you know, go forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. I think we had one other person that would like to testify or have questions.
Good morning. How's everyone today?
Good. Just need your name
I'm
and address.
Gregory Ritko, 2017 Cherrywood Drive.
Please spell your last name.
B as in boy, R-I-T-K-O. I've moved down here 2 years ago after the passing of my dad to take care of my mom. I have some concerns. When they bought the property 14 years ago, they still have the creek through there, but now there's like 2 creeks. The catch basin is what I guess you call it down here. We used to call it swales up in New England. Isn't working as intended at all with the amount of water we do have right now. When I used to visit down here every year, to see my parents, the creek, as Lee's letter stated, was minimal. And now it is just, it's huge. They have, my parents' property has massive runoff on every storm. And now we're in the process of losing trees because of it. My concern is I don't know how this works. Just touch it. This is the actual creek right now. Continues back this way towards the catch basin right behind my parents' property. It's diverted to the right. Right now, it's even clogged. The little inlets they have, the inlet and outlets, is clogged because of the last storm we had. I'm gonna have to go out there later on today when I was notified about this, and I started taking pictures of it and dig it out. We had put up dams. And I can't, obviously this isn't gonna be to scale. We put up a little dam here to sit there and divert the water to the catchment. That didn't help. And if we are gonna have this area here potentially becoming more commercial property, strip malls, et cetera, as I've heard, and you're gonna take all this wooded area and it's gonna be stripped away, there's gonna be absolutely no resistance for water coming downhill. We know how it flows. So hopefully that'll be taken into consideration. I know this is probably a little asking for a little bit too much. What's the possibility is, like Adam had said, keeping this, changes to C3, I guess you call it, keeping this R2, how about keeping this conversation land? And keep the trees there, because obviously it's just gonna get worse. If everything is just opened up, paved away, water's gonna flow downhill.
All right. Anything else?
There's conservation in the area.
Well, sir,
You need to,
you have to come back up in a minute. I'll give you an opportunity here in just a second, but anything else that you have, sir?
No, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that, before I call Mr. Beard back up, is there anyone else that would like to speak about this application? Okay, Mr. Beard?
and I do need your picture that you put up for,
Yeah, anything that was put on the screen here, we'll need a copy of for the record.
thank you.
Here's the picture that he had. You need those, I think I've got everything that I got.
Unless you've got, pictures that we don't have or whatever, but that's fine.
Just whatever you put up.
I do have people's names, people that have signed a petition for or against this. As far as the conservation, like he said, I think that would work for a lot of the people in the subdivision if he was to take the last 2.5 acres and turn that conservation. There is another area in the area that is conservation. I've got a big map here, if I can show that shows that there's more conservation in the area, and it does help control the flood waters. Let's see if I can find my big map. It shows conservation. That's not it. And I'll just show you this map, and it shows the conservation that's down from another creek that is in the area. Here we go. If you look here, I think this is the zoning map. Turn it this way. As you can see, this is the part that he's wanting to turn commercial. If he was to actually take this circled area and make that conservation, if you look down here, this is CO-1, I believe that's conservation. Am I correct on that, CO1?
Mm-hmm.
There's actually a creek that runs through here. I live here at 1100. This conservation area, when we do get massive rains, it actually holds a lot of the water back and comes through, not as bad on my property as it does up front. So if he was to take this area and, turn it to conservation, I think that would help control some of the water. If he's willing to do that, I don't think many of us would be too objected to the commercial being towards the front part and conservation towards the back part. As far as like possibly 2 acres of conservation area to control the water, and that would also be a buffer from residents actually seeing, commercial right behind their property. I'm glad he brought that up. That would be a great idea if he would be agreeable to something like that. I think everybody would be pretty happy with about 2 acres of conservation, 4 acres of, the front 3.5 acres, 3 acres of commercial, and the back 2 acres conservation area. That is a good idea. Thank you all again.
All right, thank you. All right, commissioners, we'll now
Adam, we need that map too.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you need that one?
We can make copies later but
Yeah.
just because you put it on the
All
screen.
right, Commissioners, we're now move into our questioning of the applicant and also the folks that have testified in opposition. So, any questions from the Commissioners? Yes, sir, Mr. Falvey?
And maybe Amy can show us, or Mr. Moore, I believe, what are the plans for that drainage area for the, if this
Let me
plan
get
is
Mr. Milburn
approved?
back up to, he can show us what their plans, what the applicant's plans are.
All righty.
Actually, there are no plans for that drainage area at all because we're not doing anything with this development as it stands to increase the drainage on this site whatsoever. The only reason we put that through there is so that we could make sure and reserve an easement for the through drainage system that already exists. We're not making any changes to the drainage right now. Any future drainage changes obviously would come back in a new development plan. This particular development causes so little increase in the actual runoff that you can't even hardly calculate it.
Anything else, Mr. Falvey? Okay. Any additional questions? Any additional questions? Mr. McWilliams?
Not sure to whom to address this question, but who owns the land where the creek runs through? So it's owned by property owners in the subdivision? That you own that? Okay. Excuse me? You've got to come up. I'm sorry, sir. You know, you threw up a slide and you were showing where the creek
Sure. I
was
live
and
right, just,
and where it had overflowed and whatever.
I live right here. This would be my house right there.
All right, and that's,
And the creek right now runs here, and the pictures I showed you are 4 or 5 times a year I get flooded.
now are you the first house?
In the very first house right there.
Okay, and it's your backyard. You don't, the
Right.
front of your house faces away from that creek.
Right.
And you say 4 or 5 times a year it gets flooded?
Any
How-
good storm,
Yeah,
my
like we
yard
had
will
a
flood.
week or so ago.
right. That's because you're getting water. What, like I said, he doesn't talk about it. All this 9 acres down here, this is upper level up here, upper level here, lower level here. So all the water goes towards that creek. When the subdivision was developed, it was designed to bring all the water from the west down to that creek as well. So when it rains, all the water is coming from every direction down to that creek at that spot.
Okay. When it rains normally, well, I'll just take the 4 or 5 times a year it floods that
Yeah,
you
if you get a 2 or
referred to.
3 inch rain,
How long does it stay flooded there in your backyard?
I'd say 4 hours. And then it stays wet for weeks. I got an area now, I got it on flash drive, but I got an area yard now where the easement is, where the telephone lines come down through this area right here. I can't mow because it stays constantly wet. It just comes off the hill, and then just the way the land from the development back in 2003, 2004 was, it's designed to take water that way. So I've got 1/8 of my yard, I got 3/4 acre in that Pacific corner. So probably 1/8 of it, I can't mow. because
How
it
long
stays
have you
wet.
lived there?
04, 13 years.
Have you seen a marked increase in the width and the depth
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
creek?
Oh, definitely.
So give me a ballpark on, when I moved in, it was so wide.
It's 50%. It has grown, I can bring, if you got that picture, I got another picture if you want me to show it up here. But it's kind of flat down there, so once the creek rises up, it just starts spreading. So, and I got so much underground water, I have a pool, there's so much underground water, I had to have a sump pump on the outside of my pool to keep water from building up, trying to push the pool up as well. So there's underground water that you don't even know about. It's so saturated already.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Anything else, Mr. McWilliams?
Yes, sir. Amy, I know we did notice.
Yes, sir.
We always do notice. And it's been alluded to on more than one occasion this morning that there was inadequate notice or an absence of notice. And just for the record, I'd like for you to speak to that.
Correct. There were notices, the requirement is anyone that is within 500 feet of the area to be rezoned. Granted, when the property was extended on down, that was a full 20 acres, it picked up much more of the subdivision because those homes are within 500 feet. Everyone was notified that was within 500 feet of the subject property. The property had a sign on it, and it was also advertised in the Oldham Era.
And that's what we're required to do,
Yes, sir.
and that's what we do. So, folks, if you were 505 feet away, I'm sorry.
Correct.
Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
One more, Mr.
Oh, okay, yes,
Mr.
sir.
Chairman, if
All
you
right,
will.
go ahead.
It was brought up, and I can't remember, and I apologize, about a buffer area. Who brought up something about a buffer area? Sir, would you come up, please? Could you be a little more specific about your thoughts on a buffer area and show us just exactly where you think that should be?
Because right here, this is where the building is?
Yes, sir.
Existing building? That's the bank? Oh, so it's gonna be like right here?
Yeah.
That's where the building is. I would propose something along this line here. I'm missing the screen up. I mean, as far as, if we could have this for conservation land in this area.
So that's the buffer you're talking
Yeah,
about, the
as far as-
conservation.
Because no matter what, I mean, not to be redundant, water's gonna flow downhill no matter what, and it's gotten so much worse in the 14 years since I've been coming down here than before I moved here. And if this gets stripped out, it's just gonna allow a faster rush of water.
I understand.
Versus a slower rush.
Thank you, thank you. May I do a question for Mr. Milburn?
I'm sorry?
A question for Mr.
Yeah,
Milburn?
sure.
Mr. Mail?
Yes, I do. There is, yeah.
What could be done to alleviate the flooding in that creek area?
We're dealing with multiple issues here.
All right.
And the reason I say that is obviously the area that's draining through that thing is not the only thing that's supplying water. It was even brought up by one of the
Yes, sir.
residents here that there's water coming through the entire subdivision down to that creek.
Yes, sir.
There's nothing that we can do about that. Obviously, that's off of our property. It didn't have anything to do with this property. It has nothing to do with this development or future development of this property. As far as the water that's coming from other areas, I'm talking.
Yes, sir.
He mentioned that the existing detention pond back there was not sufficient. Again, it has nothing to do with this property, and unfortunately, we as a developer of another property have no control over what's happening on the private property that's owned by someone else. However, with that being said, the county engineer will verify this. When we submit a full development plan that changes the drainage, it is always required, and we always have to meet the minimum standards, the minimum or maximum standards for that goes, that there is no change in the runoff that is created by the development. That is something that we are required to do. That is something that we always do. That's why we have detention ponds. And in this particular case, if sometime in the future the rest of this property is developed, that is when the drainage will be looked at. We're not looking at the drainage particularly for this site because we're not changing the drainage. When we come back to the county engineer's office, to Amy, to the planning commission, the change in drainage at that point will be addressed and will be fixed. We can't do anything off-site. As far as the buffer goes, if you can look on the site here, somewhat, right here, this area right here, this area right here and over to the property is already a 50-foot wide buffer area that there will be no change in whatsoever. So anyone in this area right here, looking at it is still going to see nothing but trees coming across that. We can't do anything with the road because the area of this area up here is actually is now and is going to be a road, and we can't put a buffer in that road.
Hypothetically.
Yes, sir.
The rest of that, may I ask that question, Mr. Chairman? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Hypothetically, were the undeveloped areas, as planned for now, developed at some point, and those trees that we keep talking about were removed, what I'm hearing you say is, even if they're removed, what is done on that property cannot in any way increase the amount of water that's flowing in that creek from that property.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Take it to the bank, huh?
Take it to the bank. That's why the county has the ordinance that requires the drainage system to be addressed when the development plan is submitted that changes the drainage, and that's why the requirement is that we have no increase in the runoff created by the development.
And at the appropriate time, you would share with us what is going to be done to make that happen.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Williams, thank you. Mr. King?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not sure where to begin. Let's start with staff. Existing zoning's R2. R2 is existing zoning. Conceptually, conceivably, how many units could be placed on this property? How many residential units could be placed on 5 acres under R2 zoning?
Well, if it's served by septic, it would be 1 per acre, one
residential
residence
per
per acre.
So there could be 5 homes conceptually.
Right, and then it's 12,000 square feet if it is on sewers.
12,000 if on sewers, so
So the average is about 3.6 units per acre
acre.
on sewers.
So 15 roughly.
But that's
15,
18, it could be up to 18.
I want to, it's hard for us to say that. We aren't designers. I
This
don't
is-
want us, I don't want us to be answering questions about density.
Hypothetically.
I know.
Okay,
but-
it's qualified. Thank you. I'm just trying to
Yep.
get a frame of reference.
Right.
All right. Staff again. It's safe to assume that that creek was there when Cherrywood was developed. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is that property, any of it in a floodplain?
It is not.
Okay.
Not the subject property.
Okay.
Correct.
I think I'm moving on to drainage questions. Is this city or county?
County.
Okay.
Mr. Harris.
Mr. Engineer.
Remember that Cherrywood's in the city and this
Yeah.
subject property's in the county.
So do we have people from the
but
city
you
who can
have
answer questions
experts
about
and-
drainage patterns as well? I'm going to need both of you, I think.
Okay. I don't think Mr. Harris is sworn in, were you?
Okay.
Ms. Fox, swear in Mr. Harris.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Just name and address.
Scott
for the record.
Harris, 100 West Jefferson Street.
Okay. Mr. King?
All right, so
Mr. Rusnick from the city.
either of you, there's a lot of testimony here that says there's drainage problems in the area. Have you been dealing with that type of issue?
We've been dealing with that type of issue all over the county.
What about on this site?
Not specifically, but having looked it over, I fully believe there's drainage problems in this area.
Mr. Rusnak in the city?
Sure.
Cherrywood in particular?
Yeah, where Mr. Bear's property is Cherry Ridge Run, I believe, the court back there, there's a significant amount of waterfall. We could receive calls from it.
If you had an opinion to state, would you state that this subject parcel is at the cause of those issues?
I'd say it's a contributor, but you have to keep in mind there's residential homes that contribute to the problem too.
Can you help me understand how it contributes to the problem?
Well, all the housing at Cherry Ridge Run, it all runs downhill towards the court. So, Cherrywood is contributing to the problem too.
Cherrywood's contributing to the problem. What about this property? This
Sure.
parcel that is under
It all
application?
flows through there.
Right?
Correct.
The development plan proposed, have you guys had a chance to review all right, your opinion, will this plan increase runoff as proposed?
When you increase the impervious area at all, you increase runoff.
All right? The plan has measures to address that. Is it adequate? Is it inadequate? Is it?
The plan doesn't have measures to address that. That would come in during design.
All right?
Now, they have stated they will address it. They have made perfectly clear that they're aware of the problems. The drainage easement that they're dedicating, they want to dedicate on this property, is the draining of the basin behind the property that runs through.
The basin that's not on this property,
The
though.
one that's not on this property.
All right.
That's how it drains the fact that they acknowledge that that comes through there, and they're not trying to build something on it to block it or reroute it by placing an easement there, it means they do have knowledge of the issues.
They've acknowledged that there's something there.
And they're trying to
Right.
go along with what's required.
Certainly, they're not trying to make it worse.
No, they're not trying to make it worse. And it's all wooded, so
right.
it takes as much water as you can.
As a matter of materiality, does this, the runoff from this property have a major factor in what's going on downstream?
I would say no. There's no impervious area.
You know, we don't get into the
in this map.
testify and whatever. I mean, we
Understand?
Yeah, and you're using words like major versus, I mean,
It's subjective.
Well, I know, but it's.
I'm trying to get a
I'm
frame
just
of reference
cautioning that
because I
it's-
don't understand how the impact is going to be, right?
Right. There might be some questions for the applicant, you know, that Mr. Melbourne could maybe address or whatever, also, but,
All right, all right. All right, thank you, gentlemen. I think I'm through. The ownership of this little sliver of land, the Pine Ridge Road, who owns that? Who owns that?
yeah,
Okay.
Mr. McWilliam, or Mr. Williamson?
Pine Ridge Road's a private road, and,
Is there not a private party that has the
oh,
ownership?
you wanna, okay, I'm gonna tell you who I think owns it.
Okay,
The original developer probably owns Pine Ridge Road. In 1993, I filed a lawsuit in circuit court to determine the rights, possibly the duties of the people that had lots on Pine Ridge Road. And what the court came back and said was it was a private road, that the owners of the property we have before you today, lot number 1, Shannon Acres, had a right to use that road for ingress and egress out to Highway 53, and the owners of lots 2 and 3 had the same rights. After 2000, probably when Cub Bank was built, the issue came up again as to Pine Ridge Road. And basically what, as I remember, because I was involved in it with Mr. Westbrook, the question was who was going to improve that portion of a road from Highway 53 out to the back of Cub, and who was going to be responsible for the roadway. And it was agreed by the parties, Cub was probably involved in those negotiations because they wanted a road. And I would imagine they paid for the road, which was built to county standards. Now, I may be wrong about this, but I always thought that part of the road was in the county, and it was maintained by the county. It was taken over by the county. The rest of this road, I would envision the same thing happening, is that the county, if it's constructed in accordance with your all standards, would take over the road. And it'd become a public way at that point in time.
Mr. King, anything else?
and a point of clarity, I forget who it was who provided, Mr. Williamson, thank you, who was telling us about vegetation and trees on that property that were apparently not in maintenance of any sort, especially dying ash trees. Is that correct? Is that where these trees are? Is on that strip of land?
We need
Please come
get-
to the podium.
Whoever's going to testify, we need to get him to come back up to the podium, please.
You know, all the trees, the ash trees are all dead. I guess the bugs ate them or something.
On this property?
On this property. yes, sir.
On the Pinewood on the Pinewood Road property?
Yeah, like this is my property right here.
Uh-huh.
All the ash trees along in here, along this utility line, whatever it is, because they come through every so often and cut them so they don't get into the utility lines. They're all pretty much,
But this is not property that's adjacent to you. This is, the
Yeah.
Pinewood Road strip is what's adjacent to you, correct?
what are you asking?
Well,
There's a lot of vegetation there.
am I misreading this map? Is there not a piece of property between this gentleman's residence and the applicant, and the applicant's property?
There is, yes.
Oh,
Pine Ridge Road Let me find a better picture here. Because as part of this case, we had to go through, and which it doesn't go down far enough, but this is the applicant's property. This is the 60-foot Pine Ridge Road area. This is the Westbrook property. This is the 60-foot Pine Ridge Road area. So there is Pine Ridge Road area right-of-way in between the homes along in Cherrywood, the Westbrook property.
Okay.
There's a 60-foot strip of land in between there.
All right, and we don't know exactly who has that ownership. Okay. All right. Yes,
Hold on,
thank
just
you.
The property that is owned, that is here, is listed in Westbrook's deed. So Westbrook does own that section of Pine Ridge Road. In deed research.
Hopefully, a point of clarification would be the trees you're asking about, the ones I spoke of, are along the creek line. So further into Cherrywood, the older section of Cherrywood where I live, Lee Kaiser lives.
Can you touch the map where that is approximately?
Yeah, if you could,
It's a little
that'd be
bit
great.
further out for you.
Show me where Richwood is on this.
Richwood is the brown right here.
Okay, and so we're at 1004 Oakwood Court. Right here.
Keep touching one more time. There you go.
And so the creek runs between the nursing home and all of these homes along the line. So our point is that anything we do is going to compound that issue. We just removed those 10 emerald ash trees a month ago, and they're huge. And so we've already got this drainage issue along that creek, and we have more trees that need to come down. This is only phase 2 of taking trees down. We have more, and then on his property as well.
I'm sharing your pain on the ash borers, okay?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, sir.
But
Yes, so-
is it true that the ash borers are the things that are killing the trees, not drainage?
I'm sure it's both.
Well, and,
But
I think
my
we're
point-
getting a little far out of field here.
Okay.
And really,
All
this
right.
isn't on their property or whatever in
Thank
question
you.
here. So.
That's where I'm going,
But my
and that's what
point
I'm
is,
looking to
whatever
clarify.
is developed on that property, more trees are taken down. We've just taken a significant amount of trees
Yes.
down on a part that's already flooding. And so I think we're clear on that, but I just wanted to have that point of clarification
Very
where
good.
those trees were. Yep.
All right, Mr. Williamson?
I came here today to deal with the property in question. We've gotten off the property in question. We're back at the Westbrook property, but I will say this, that Pine Ridge Road from the corner, see if I get the right spot, from right here on back is owned by John and Mary Beth Westbrook, and it's in their deed, and they do have title to that. When I was out here talking a minute ago, I was talking about from that point that I just marked on out to Highway 53, what I know about that. And you asked me, who do I think owns it? And I think it's the original developer still owns that part of the road, and it's a private road. We had a few problems, and I've been to court a couple of times.
Mr. King, anything
I
else?
think that's plenty, Mr.
Okay.
Chair. Mhm.
Mr. Horton.
Thank you. I'm crossing off questions as fast as you guys ask them down there. Drainage sure sounds like it's a long-term problem on the property here. You all have talked a lot some of the opposition, a lot about conservation area. Would Mr. Bayer or any of the others like to address why you think if they gave a conservation area that it would change the drainage, since this has been double the amount of conservation for all these years and you still have a drainage problem?
The way I look at it, I mean, we've always had a drainage problem. The drainage problem has just gotten worse. When the development was first put in, the drainage wasn't as big of an issue. Since they put in Tractor Supply and they put in the other commercial units around this lot, is when the drainage has started to get worse. The more they add, the worse it gets. And that's where I'm saying this, Cub Bank, that contributed. I mean, you could tell a little bit each time they added more commercial area and stripped the land. And, that's why I'm saying I think a conservation area would help, because it seems like every time they strip a little area and add parking lots and buildings, that every little bit that they take away adds a little bit more to that creek. And over time, over the 15 years, I have noticed a drastic difference. And as they've testified, it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. And I believe obviously you can't stop, things from occurring, everything's advancing, more commercial units, LaGrange is getting bigger. We understand that. And we think just by, taking that maybe to where you start the nursing home, that last 2 acres or something, by keeping that conservation, at that point there will be no more development in the area as far as close by, other than all the commercial area that's currently for sale. All those, if you look at the map, all those pending areas are all commercial pending. There's nothing on there yet. When they start building on them, we already know that's going to contribute to this. All that water is going to come that way. When they build, I think there's a Mexican or restaurant going in there. When they put that in, Gustavo's, that's obviously going to contribute more. We think by leaving a conservation area, it will give the water time to, in the really large rains, it won't help a lot. But during even the smaller rains won't affect the creek as much.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Horton, and I think, we're getting a little bit out of field here again because, we're asking, I think, the line of questioning is going, to this 5 acre lots and it's really, all of the other properties that adjoin that. And I think Mr. Harris has pointed out.
That's what he
that
was
the-
asking. Oh, go
that the
ahead.
development plan is, has to address this 5 acres. And, so I think, we need to kind of stay focused on, on this development that's being proposed today. So.
Yeah, the reason I brought it up was because we had so many people talk about conservation area as if it might solve a problem.
We
I
think
thought-
it would help. It would
I thought I'd
it would
give them
help
an
the problem.
opportunity to at least say why they think it may solve that problem. But,
It
but
just
thank you
seems
very
like-
much.
It
Thank-
seems like there's not a true plan on the area
Okay.
and a conservation.
I think we
area.
understand your
Okay.
concern. Thank
Yeah,
you, sir.
thank you. I have one more question,
Yes,
please.
uh-huh.
Mr. Milburn, is it? Yeah. They mentioned a residential waiver. If you got a residential waiver, and maybe the staff can go to this, conceivably that could go forever. The plan not be ever fulfilled. We'd be back where we are right now, which is a home there being rented or leased for the next 10 years or until somebody else develops it. Is that correct?
The only reason I mentioned the residential waiver was staff informed me that it would be a good idea to ask for a residential waiver in case the property would continue to be rented for some period of time. I don't think Mr. Hall plans on renting a property as a residence any longer than necessary. I think he'd like to have the print shop, lithograph shop moved into the house. He doesn't really want to rent the property, but the residential waiver would just give him some protection in case, the deal fell through until he has found somebody else to get in the house commercially now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All righty. I think I had Ms. Bonet next, and then Mr. Douglas.
Ms. Alvey, I have a question. If the zoning is approved and this property is a C3 adjacent to R2, and developed as C3, what is the required setback when it abuts residential for commercial development, and what type of landscaping buffers are required?
Well, it's listed on your plan. It has a landscape buffer that is on there. There's a 50-foot landscape
So that's
buffer.
if the zoning was approved.
If the zoning was approved.
Is that 35? I'm trying
Would be considered a side yard, so it'd be 15.
Okay.
But there's a 50-foot landscape buffer, so obviously they wouldn't be able to be any closer than 50 feet because that is the landscape buffer that abuts R2.
So is that what you're circling right there? Is that the 50-foot landscaping buffer right there?
That is a 50-foot landscape buffer.
And then the setback for construction?
It would be 15 feet from the property line. But there's already, that's
Right.
what I'm saying, there's already a 50-foot landscape buffer, and you can't construct in the landscape buffer, so technically it would be 15 feet.
Okay. And then the other question I had actually was for one of the gentlemen that spoke about the conservation. Can you come up for just a second? I just want to make sure I understood you correctly, and I'm not sure where your lot is in proximity to this property, but did you say you had installed a dam?
Well, it's pieces of plastic siding
Okay.
because the natural creek flow, when they put the catch basin in,
Yes.
it still goes the natural flow. So what's happened over the years, my dad and Lee Kaiser, the president of the association, they're probably about this long when the original size of the creek. And both planks are about
So you're trying to contain the creek
Trying
into
to
its
divert the water to
original.
go to the catch basin. Because, and now there's.
I thought the flow of the water was heading into Cherrywood and the catch basin is on the Tractor Supply property?
No, that's a different one.
Okay.
There's another, and I can't see it here. I'm at 2017.
I guess my main concern is, are you restricting the flow of the water by what you installed, or are you
No, we're trying to
containing it?
divert it, no, we're trying to divert it to the catch basin.
Okay. So it's just altering the direction, but not restricting the flow?
Yeah, at some point after my parents bought the property, and I don't know if this was the association of the builder, or whoever the development, the guy was, the company, they constructed this, what we call a swell, a catch basin, where from the natural flow of the water to control it. Well, the amount of water that's increased now since my parents purchased the property, and I used to visit every year, is increased tenfold. And
We probably have other people that want to ask questions. Basically, I just want to make sure you weren't restricting the flow, because I
No.
was concerned that your neighbor with his pool getting ready to pop out of his yard might be actually having water build up from a dam. When you use the word dam,
Yeah,
it
yeah, it was probably
concerned
wrong
me a little bit.
terminology.
I just wanted clarification, so that's fine.
All righty.
And thank you.
Anything else, Ms. Bonet? Okay, Mr. Douglas.
Salvi, I have a question. Currently, the property is zone R2.
Correct.
And I know Ms. Bonet asked you a question about what the setback was and the buffers, landscape buffer was for the proposed C3. What is the setback and the buffering, landscape buffering for R2?
There is no landscape buffer requirements in R2, so if it was developed as a residential subdivision or residential lots, there are no landscape buffer requirements.
So my question is that whoever the current owner of this property is decided they wanted to come in and cut every tree down on that lot, they could in R2.
Correct. There is no landscape buffer requirement.
So what you do have now could not be there if it was changed, maybe. So just keep that in mind as far as anyone opposing. My next question is that under the proposed, because then we're going to get down to the gritty part of this, is that the comprehensive plan states what? That the recommendation of the future land use of this property.
The future land use map shows it as attached multifamily is what that future land use map shows. That entire, there's 3 tracks there.
And what zone would that be?
Well, it's not really as zoned. It doesn't say particularly R4, but it's called attached multifamily. And the definition of that for attached multifamily allows for office, neighborhood, commercial, local business, and community business. So attached multifamily as well as those other non-residential uses.
Could be apartment complexes?
Yes, sir.
Could it be other type multifamily?
Yes. as
Facilities.
patio homes or other attached
Under
multifamily.
C3, can they put multifamily?
No, they cannot.
Okay. So, my next question is that if we're going to get down to where KRS 100 states that the justification, my question is that regarding this proposed zoning, if we revert back to R2 or revert to land use, that's a requirement that we must go to physical court for approval
Correct.
on whatever recommendation we make, correct?
Correct.
Okay. My next question is for, I guess, Mr. Harris.
Yes.
If we made this recommendation to C3, and it does get approved by physical court, and there was some conversations about the runoff and the changes of the water flow and land clearing, do you want to enlighten us here on the commissioner and then maybe the public about what's required on anything of land clearing over 1 acre?
Well,
If they decide not to propose the developmental plan there,
how much time do you have?
Short.
We're running down on our time here.
Make it 1 minute. There's ordinances, correct?
Yes. If you're wanting to disturb over an acre or less than an acre, if you're part of a larger development, you are required to detain the water to the pre-development rate. So you calculate what comes off the property and through the property. That's why this easement has been proposed, because the pond behind the property drains through the property. So you account for all of that now, and you can't be any more after you put in parking lots, roofs, impervious area.
And of course, at this time, you haven't seen their stormwater runoff plan yet.
No, that's.
Site plan, okay.
For what they're proposing.
There's really no changes yet.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I have one question for Mr. Williamson. Yes, you. I know you've discussed and you proposed to us that there's been major changes of economic and social changes in the area. You mentioned those words, but I'm waiting for evidence to support that.
Okay, well, I mean, I think just the staff report shows that. I mean, we've got Cub Bank, we've got Kroger, we got Tractor Supply. Since 1976, I mean, Ms. Perkison, Norma Perkison, when she bought that property, she was like she was out on a farm somewhere, because that was it. She was the single resident in that area. And it's really changed a whole lot since that time. That's why I say the zoning's just not appropriate at the present time. Now, what you do with it, it's up to the planning commission and up to the fiscal court. We're asking for C3. We think that a C3 use of this property is appropriate at this time. Does that answer your question?
It does. I was trying to get you to talk more about that justification for that change because of the developmental plan, and I think it's on a wishful thinking that there is going to be a business there. Is that what we're hoping, or because I mean
Well,
we're
is it wishful thinking? I don't think so,
Okay.
no. I mean, Mr. Hall has gotten a letter of intent from the party but wants to use the property, to rent the property.
I
He's
think-
gone that far.
I think it muddied the issue, though, when there was conversation about a waiver for renters.
I'll tell you.
I'm not sure that kind of.
I'm sorry if I muddied the water.
Well, it kinda
I went with
muddied
the
it,
staff's recommendation in that regard. If y'all don't want to grant the residential waiver, that's fine. I mean, we'll be fine with that. You know what happens if things don't work out and we come back 2 months from now and say, well, you rezoned the property, our tenant decided not to come and use that property. We're kind of sitting here in a quandary trying to figure out what we're going to do. Planning Commission, could we have a residential waiver? If y'all want to limit it to 2 months or 6 months or whatever it might be, that's fine too. Mr. Hall, if he buys the property, would like to have, some kind of income out of a property. So if I muddied the water, I'm sorry.
Douglas, I think that came from staff's recommendation. That was not the applicant's recommendation or whatever. And so, I think we can let staff speak to that in a minute. But, I think that came strictly from the staff's recommendation, so that if, it took a while to get that site developed and get it, somebody in there, for the lithographic shop and print shop, that they would have an opportunity to at least continue to lease the house, or whatever. So.
Right, and I don't see a problem with it simply because in the interim, is somebody living in the house currently?
No, I don't believe they are. I don't think
Well,
there's anybody in there.
If they don't make any changes to the property, adding parking or a commercial use, and they want to use the property, it would require a waiver to do it. Otherwise, it's going to sit vacant. We never like vacant properties
Well,
because they become code issues.
I'm always in agreement, though, that if we're gonna make a recommendation to change the zoning classification to fiscal court, I hope that,
Well, we used to have tiered zoning where you could have residential and commercial. That doesn't exist anymore. In '07, that was changed. So you're kind of stuck in a zoning category. And we've granted residential use of industrial property in the past, and so I think it's a fairly simple consideration in this particular case.
Mr. Douglas, does that answer your question? Because we've run down, I added 9 minutes a while ago to our questioning time, and so, you know, unless there's something that you haven't had, you know, the commissioners haven't had answered yet, okay, I'll allow another question here. Ms. Smith, I think?
I think Mr. Hall would be the proper person for this. They've been talking about the photography shop and a lithographic shop, but in our packet, it showed a frame shop. Are you planning on just one commercial tenant or?
I have spoken to 2 or 3 people about this property, but I only have a letter of intent from one individual who is primarily giving me a letter of intent for a printing and a frame shop.
Okay.
This individual has been in that business for a number of years in the past, had a rather large business in Louisville at one time, did considerable amount of printing in downtown Louisville for various customers, has retired from it and is interested in possibly opening up a small print shop. I don't, and I'm going to be totally honest and candid here with the commission, I don't know for 100% that I'm going to be able to work that out, but I have someone that's interested in doing that. If I don't work it out, I want to stress, this is not the last time you're going to see me. I will be back here before this commission again. I promise you that. And if we can't work something out that causes such little change in the area, in that current structure, and I have to come before you again with a different and new development plan because this land is sitting in between Tractor Supply and the Kroger location, I will come back with a development plan. I will, and I'm sure you, Mr. Melbourne, will be more than happy to charge me to come back with a drainage plan. And it will meet your all satisfaction or you won't approve it. And, you know, I just want to say this. I think it is totally unfair. And this property right now today is not my property. I have a contract to purchase this property. This property belongs to the gentleman sitting in the back of the room. Gary, would you stand up? Gary Perkinson. He's the man that owns the property. And to ask him to take 2 acres or any amount of his property that's not currently conservation and make it conservation, which devalues the property considerably when you do that, is unfair to him. It's not going to hurt me because I probably won't buy it. It's just that simple. But it's unfair to Mr. Perkinson. And I don't know what else to say about it. I'll be happy to answer any questions if y'all have them.
Okay. Anything else, Ms. Smith?
Yes, your plan for parking for the way the house is to be used, your potential use of the house, how much do those increased parking places, how much area is that going to take?
Probably, it's on the plan there, but I probably need Mr. Melbourne to address that. I think he put on it for 11 spaces, correct, Mel? 11 spaces, 4,025 square feet.
I missed that, sorry.
Okay, is that all?
Yeah.
Okay, folks, let's move into the next portion of our planning procedure here. We've got rebuttal evidence and cross-examination by the applicant. Mr. Williamson, do you have any rebuttal? Okay, well, probably we need to get that on the record.
No, we have no rebuttal. Thank you.
All right, rebuttal evidence and cross-examination by the opposition. Anyone that spoke, in opposition? Yes, sir, come back up and just
I'd like to say,
give your name again.
Greg Ward, 2203 Cherrywood Drive. I would like to say as a plan is submitted, that if you approve it as shown with the drainage ditch in there, he can come back and do that and feed any water to the creek if he would remove that. Because if you approve it as shown, then he can do whatever he wants, to add it or not. All right?
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Adam Bear. I would just like to say, it seems like there's a lot of questions with this land. The developmental plan isn't much of a developmental plan, and I think it should be, he should have a full developmental plan for the full 6 acres that he wants to turn commercial. We need to see a whole plan before we vote on turning 6 acres commercial, or 5.5. Thank you.
All right, anyone else as far as rebuttal? Okay, we'll now move into the final statement of the opposition. Do you all have a final statement? Okay. All right, we'll now then move into final statement of the applicant. Mr. Williamson.
Really, all I want to say is that came here today dealing with a piece of property, 1824 Pine Ridge Road, and we've gone all over the place. And it's a little hard to defend yourself when you're off the property. I think Mr. Melbourne said it just as well as anybody. I can only deal with what we have right here, nothing else. And I think it's really important. I think Mr. Hall says it well too, that any additional development, any changes, he's going to be back here with a development plan. Mr. Melbourne said it well too. The present development plan, which we're asking for approval of, does not change the drainage enough to amount to anything. We don't have to put a detention basin in or anything like that. There's no substantial change. Now, what has changed since 1976 is the property. What's there? What's around that property? It's commercial development. I think it's time to change the zoning of a property. The comprehensive plan recommends a change. I mean, Ms. Alvey came up here a minute ago, and there it is, up on the board. If it's changed to what is in the comprehensive plan, we're going to end up with something like R4 possibly, some commercial, but we're talking about commercial development of a property. Everything around it's commercial just about. Why not this piece of property? We can't say anything about the drainage on the Westbrook property. It's not before you today. We can only ask you to change the zoning on this one piece of property and approve a development plan that we've submitted. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. I appreciate your time, your questions, and they're pointed questions sometimes, but they're good questions. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you, sir. All right, with that, the hearing on docket PZ 17017 and PZ 17018 is complete. And now I'll ask Mr. Urban, we will consider the zoning change request, or zoning map amendment request first, and I'll ask him to outline what we need to consider for that.
There are 3 decisions you're going to be asked to consider. The first one is the zoning map amendment. In your staff report, as always, there are sample motions for either to approve or recommend approval or denial. And this is, again, a recommendation to Oldham County Fiscal Court.
Okay. All right, with that, Commissioners, you've heard what's being asked for under the first docket, which is the zoning map amendment, which is docket PZ 17017. So the chair would now entertain a motion on the zoning map amendment request. Ms. Bonet?
I move that we approve recommendation to the Oldham County Fiscal Court of the zoning map amendment from R2 to C3 zoning. There have been major changes of economic, physical, and social nature within the area that were not anticipated. And the major changes are the amount of commercial zoning that surrounds this property. And the basic character has changed from rural to more of a business-type area with Kroger, Tractor Supply, and Cub Bank being in close proximity.
Okay. Mr. Carter, is that an adequate motion?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second now?
Second.
Okay. Mr. Horton seconds. Now we'll open it up for discussion on docket PC 17017, which is the zoning map amendment request to change from R2 to C3. Do we have any discussion? Mr. McWilliams.
Mr. Chairman, I'm in support of the recommendation to approve for all of the reasons that have been stated. I hear the pain of folks that have water issues in their backyard because I'm one of those folks too when it rains. As a matter of fact, I've got part of my backyard I haven't mowed yet. However, there's been so much change in that area. It's clearly the right thing to do, in my mind, to go commercially with that. But I'm also very concerned, and I think we have, in my opinion, we have an ethical obligation to people that are downline to make absolutely sure that what we're doing up here, Jay, is not going to cause a lot of problems for people down here. And I heard both you and Mel stand up unequivocally and say, when the time comes, we're going to deal with that. And we're not going to make it worse for these folks in any manner, form, or fashion. So that being said, I support.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion on the motion to amend the zoning map?
Recommendation.
Yeah, okay. Recommendation. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll ask Ms. Fox if she would, and this is a motion to approve a zoning map amendment request that will go to fiscal court on approximately 5 acres, and the requested change is from R2 residential to C3 commercial business district. So this is a motion to approve.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mr. Mesker,
Yes.
Mr. McWilliams,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Arvin,
Yes.
Ms. Bonet,
Yes.
Ms. Crosby,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Mr. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. Douglas,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mr. Neal.
Yes.
No, we'll do that third.
All right, the vote on the zoning map amendment request, which will go to fiscal court for their consideration, has been approved on a vote of 12-0. All right, the next item we need to consider is docket PC 17018, which is the application for a development plan on approximately 5 acres. So, Mr. Urban, would you outline what's being requested here?
Sure. There is, again, sample motions for either approval or denial of the preliminary development plan in your packet. There are 3 proposed binding elements that have heard. The first is that at any time the use of the property changes or is expanded, which causes an increase in the required parking or increase in trip generation, the applicant will be required to submit a revised development plan to be reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission. The second item is that the applicant is required to submit a landscape plan for review and approval by the staff. And the third is that the preliminary plan must comply with all established federal, state, and county ordinances and requirements at the time of approval. And I think that effectively covers all of the requirements for drainage, site plan development, or any other requirements that we have in our regulations.
All right, Commissioners, you've heard what's being requested on the development plan on docket PC 17018.